Sierra Warren had developed a reputation as the kind of attorney people didn't forget. Calm/elegant, and unbothered by storms that sent other lawyers scrambling. At 33, she spoke with a kind of precision that made juries lean forward and opposing counsel straightened in their seats. She carried herself with confidence, her natural curls pinned neatly above a face that remained unreadable even when chaos erupted around her. But on the morning the Briggs case landed on her desk, she stopped cold, staring at the thick folder, as if it pulsed with warning. Her supervisor had placed it there with an unmistakable look of relief, muttering, "You're the only one who won't lose your sanity with this man." Sierra flipped open the file and immediately understood why every attorney before her had begged to be reassigned. Half the pages were city citations, the rest were written complaints from officials, code inspectors, tax officers, even a postal worker, each reporting the same thing. Clayton Briggs refuses to comply. Clayton Briggs shouted that laws don't apply to him. Clayton Briggs threatened to report me to some imaginary constitutional committee. One statement was underlined twice in red. Defendant rejects all authority, claims he is outside the jurisdiction of the state. Sierra exhaled slowly. A sovereign citizen type 1 of the most exhausting categories of people a lawyer could encounter. They rejected taxes, refused to acknowledge laws, and insisted the government was a corporate illusion designed to enslave them. She closed the file and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She could already feel the stress building behind her temples. Still, she was Sierra Warren. She didn't run from complicated cases. She dissected them. She gathered her notes, straightened her blazer, and walked out the door. Courtroom 4B felt electric when she entered. Reporters filled the benches, pens ready, cameras poised. City employees gathered in hushed clusters, whispering rumors about the infamous Clayton Briggs. Even lawyers with no business there had slipped into seats, eager to witness the confrontation everyone had predicted for years. And at the front of the courtroom sat Judge Renata, Hale, known for her razor-sharp mind, controlled voice, and refusal to tolerate nonsense. Her dark robe hung perfectly, her posture straight, her expression severe. Sierra admired her deeply. She'd studied Hale's cases in law school like scripture. When the judge signaled for the bailiff to bring in the defendant, silence fell like a stone. The doors opened, and Clayton Briggs walked in with the defiant energy of a man entering a battlefield. Tall, broad-shouldered, unshaven, clothes faded and dusty. He looked as though he had marched straight out of a barn. Instead of sitting, he planted himself beside the defendant's table, arms folded stubbornly across his chest. Judge Hale regarded him with a flat expression. "Mr. Briggs," she said, "take your seat." "No," he replied simply. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Sierra kept her expression neutral, though she felt the tension coiling in the air. "Mr. Briggs," the judge repeated, her tone firming, "you are required to participate in these proceedings." "I do not consent to your authority," he declared. "You work for a corporation disguised as a government. I am a free and sovereign man." Judge Hale's nostrils flared barely a millimeter. "That argument is not recognized in any court in this country. Sit down." "No." That single word seemed to vibrate through the air. The judge wrote something on her pad. "Let the record reflect that the defendant refuses to be seated." Briggs smirked, as if he'd achieved some kind of victory. Sierra rose when the judge nodded, smoothing her blazer and addressing the room with her calm, rich voice. "Your Honor, the city intends to show that Mr. Briggs has violated multiple municipal codes, obstructed enforcement officers, and ignored every lawful summons for the last 3 years. His actions." Briggs slammed his palm on the table so hard the microphones rattled. "Objection. These fake codes do not apply to me. I answered only to the Constitution, Mr. Briggs." Judge Hale's voice snapped through the room like a whip. "Sit down." "I won't," he insisted. "I refuse to be part of this fraudulent proceeding." The judge stared at him for a long moment. Everyone in the courtroom held their breath. Sierra felt her heart beating steadily, the way it always did before something irreversible happened. "Mr. Briggs," Judge Hale said, "do you intend to follow any lawful instruction today?" "No." Do you intend to acknowledge the court's authority at any point? No. Judge Hawley closed her folder. Very well. Briggs straightened proudly, believing he had outmaneuvered her. He had no idea how wrong he was. Bailiff, Hawley ordered calmly, take Mr. Briggs into custody for contempt of court. The courtroom exploded in whispers and gasps. Sierra watched as 2 officers approached. Briggs tried to pull away, shouting about tyranny and corruption, but the officers gripped his arms firmly. Another officer stepped forward when he tried to twist free. You can't arrest me, Briggs roared. You have no power over me. This is illegal. Judge Hawley didn't flinch. You will remain in custody until you choose to comply with this court. Briggs' voice echoed down the hallway even after the doors slammed shut behind him. Silence settled once more. Judge Hawley looked directly at Sierra. Ms. Warren, she said, it seems your case has taken an accelerated turn. Sierra exhaled slowly. Yes, Your Honor. But deep inside, she felt a strange unease. Briggs had been more than stubborn, he had been frantic, as if terrified of something bigger than the courtroom. Sierra didn't know it yet, but jailing Clayton Briggs was not the end of her problems. It was the spark that would ignite them, and it would drag her into a truth far more dangerous than a man who thought laws didn't apply to him. Sierra didn't usually visit defendants in holding cells. That was the job of public defenders or police investigators, not city attorneys. But something about the way Clayton Briggs had shouted as he was dragged out of the courtroom kept replaying in her mind. It wasn't just anger, there had been fear behind it, buried and raw, as though he wasn't fighting the judge at all, but something no one else could see. After court adjourned, Sierra packed her files, slung her bag over her shoulder, and headed toward the county detention facility across the street. She told herself she simply wanted clarification on some facts. She told herself it was procedural. But deep down, she knew it was curiosity, a lawyer's instinct, tugging at threads until the truth unraveled. The smell of disinfectant hit her the moment she stepped inside. 2 deputies guided her down the corridor, their boots echoing against concrete. When they reached Briggs's cell, Sierra saw him sitting on the metal bench, his hands cuffed to the chain around his waist. His hair hung over his face, and he didn't look up until the deputy rapped the bars. You've got a visitor? Clayton lifted his head slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, not from crying but from exhaustion, the exhaustion of someone who had been fighting a battle alone for too long. When he recognized Sierra, he scoffed. What do you want, city girl? I want to talk, she said evenly. The deputies stepped back, but stayed nearby. Sierra approached the bars, keeping her posture composed. You made quite the impression in court today. I meant every word, he muttered. Then maybe you can explain it, she said. Why reject every order? Why ignore every citation? Why behave as if laws don't apply to you? Her voice softened. You're not stupid, Mr. Briggs. So, what are you really running from? For a long moment, he said nothing. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched, muscles tight. Then, in a low, gravelly voice, he murmured, You shouldn't be here. Sierra blinked. Excuse me? You shouldn't have taken this case, he said without lifting his head. You think I'm the problem? His eyes finally rose, meeting hers with startling intensity. I'm not. A quiet, uneasy chill slid through Sierra's spine. She remained calm. Then, who is? Clayton looked toward the security camera in the hallway, then at the deputies, before his voice dropped even lower. The city knows what's on my land. They've known for years. That's why they want me out. That's why they keep trying to seize my property. Sierra felt the instinctive tightening in her chest, the feeling she always got when someone spouted conspiracy theories. Mr. Briggs, the city doesn't want your land. They want you to follow the law. You're wrong, he said bitterly. They've already tried 3 times to buy me out. When I wouldn't sell, they tried to condemn it. When that didn't work, they sent inspectors every month, trying to catch anything they could find me for. His eyes narrowed. And then they sent you. No one sent me, Sierra said quietly. I'm a city attorney assigned to the case because of your actions. nothing more. Clayton leaned forward, the chains rattling. You think this is about some chicken coop or property tax? You have no idea what they buried out there. And you will regret being part of this. Sierra forced her expression to stay steady. What exactly are you claiming, Mr. Briggs? But instead of answering, he suddenly gripped the bars with both hands and said in a hoarse whisper, Don't trust anyone from the city, especially not the ones who act polite. They're the worst. His breathing quickened. They already killed one man over this. They'll kill more. The deputies straightened, hands hovering near their belts. Sierra stepped back from the bars, unsure whether she was listening to a delusion or the beginning of something darker. When she didn't respond, Clayton slammed his cuffed wrists against the metal. You think I'm stubborn? You think I'm insane? Go look at the land records. Go ask why the city rezoned my entire property without ever notifying me. Go check what they discovered under my barn. Then come back and tell me I'm crazy. Mr. Briggs? Calm down, one deputy barked, stepping forward. Clayton didn't stop. They're coming for you too, he warned Sierra. You're part of their machine now, whether you wanted to be or not. Enough, the deputy snapped. He signaled another guard, and together they restrained Briggs, pulling him away from the bars as he continued shouting warnings that echoed down the corridor. Sierra watched, heart pounding in a rhythm she couldn't control. She had dealt with aggressive defendants, angry clients, and conspiracy theorists, but something about Clayton's words clung to her like smoke. The city had indeed attempted to rezone land before, but she had never seen a case described with the strange urgency Clayton displayed, and that line about something being buried under his barn, was it a metaphor or something real? When she finally walked out of the detention center, the afternoon sun felt hotter than usual, pressing on her shoulders like a heavy hand. She paused on the sidewalk, taking a long breath. Clayton Briggs might have been stubborn. He might have been eccentric. But Sierra couldn't shake the feeling that whatever he was tangled in was more than mere defiance, and she had just stepped directly into the middle of it. Sierra couldn't stop thinking about Clayton Briggs and his cryptic warnings. Every step she took through the city streets felt heavier, as though the sun itself carried some unspoken weight. Back in her office, she spread the case files across her desk, reading every document, every citation, every complaint filed against Briggs. But nothing in the official records hinted at what he had said about something buried beneath his barn. It wasn't in the city's notes. It wasn't in the inspector's reports. And yet, the intensity in his eyes, the desperation in his voice, refused to leave her. Something hidden that made him fight so fiercely against authorisan somehow. She knew she had to find it before it was too late. Later that evening, she drove past the neighborhood where Briggs's property sprawled across acres of uneven terrain. From the road, it seemed ordinary, a ramshackle barn, overgrown grass, and fences that had seen better days. But Sierra's instincts told her otherwise. She parked a block away, pretending to check her phone, and studied the property through her binoculars. The barn stood larger than expected, looming like a sentinel over the acres of land. There were no lights on, no signs of activity, yet the sense of secrecy hung in the air like fog. Sierra felt a twinge of caution. Clayton had warned her, don't trust anyone from the city. But something inside her refused to turn away. The next morning, Sierra requested permission from Judge Hawley to visit the site under supervision, citing the city's interest in compliance with property codes. Hawley had raised her brow but allowed it, perhaps sensing the importance Sierra placed on uncovering the truth. Accompanied by 2 deputies and a city inspector, Sierra walked the uneven path toward the barn. The tall grass swayed around her boots, hiding roots and stones that threatened to trip her at every step. She kept her gaze fixed on the structure, imagining what secrets might lie beneath the rotting wood and rusted tin. When they reached the barn, the inspector began his usual measurements and recordings, but Sierra's eyes were drawn to a particular spot at the far end, a patch of earth that seemed unnaturally smooth, almost disturbed. Clayton had said something had been buried under his barn, but what could it be? Sierra crouched down, brushing aside dry leaves, noticing the soil's unusual She exchanged a glance with one deputy, who simply nodded, but said nothing. The tension in the air was thick, a quiet warning that this was no ordinary inspection. As she examined the patch, she felt the hair on her neck prickle. A low groan echoed from within the barn, subtle but unmistakable. The deputies stiffened, hands resting on their belts. Sierra's heart pounded, but her curiosity pushed her forward. She gently pried at the soil with a small trowel the inspector had brought, uncovering what looked like a small, weathered box. It was partially caked in mud, but unmistakably man-made. She paused, glancing up at the deputies. "Should I open it?" Before anyone could answer, the barn door creaked loudly, as if warning her to stop. Sierra's instincts screamed caution, but she knew she couldn't ignore what Clayton had fought to keep secret. With a deep breath, she lifted the box, feeling its surprising weight. The deputies watched silently, expressions unreadable, while Sierra carried it to a safer, more open area. The box's surface was scratched and rusted, but a lock held it tight. Her fingers traced the metal edges. This was no ordinary find. Clayton's stubbornness, his defiance, his warnings, all of it, suddenly made sense. What he had been protecting could change everything, not just for him, but for the city and for anyone who thought they understood the story. Sierra glanced around the property, half expecting Clayton to appear and yell at her. But the land was empty, eerily quiet. She felt the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. The box wasn't just evidence, it was a puzzle, a secret waiting to expose truths that someone, somewhere, had gone to extreme lengths to hide. Sierra knew that opening it would set a chain of events in motion she couldn't yet predict. She returned to her office with the box locked in her briefcase, glancing over her shoulder at the city streets, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. For the first time, she felt a pang of fear, not for herself, but for the storm she had just stepped into. Clayton Briggs wasn't simply stubborn. He was a guardian of something much larger, something dangerous, and Sierra had now become part of it. And she understood with a chilling certainty. The courtroom confrontation had been just the beginning. What lay inside the box could destroy reputations, topple careers, and even threaten lives. Clayton's warnings echoed in her mind as she locked the door behind her. The world she had known, the orderly, lawful world, was gone. In its place was uncertainty, danger, and a stubborn man who refused to yield. Sierra sat at her desk, staring at the briefcase. The questions she couldn't yet answer churned in her mind. Who had buried the box? Why had Clayton fought so fiercely to protect it? And most importantly, was she prepared for the consequences of uncovering what the world had worked so hard to hide? The answers would not come easily, and the longer she waited, the more certain she became that others would arrive before she had a chance to act. Sierra spent the night restless, the image of Clayton Briggs's fierce, warning eyes haunting her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice echoing, "They're coming for you too." The box on her desk seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour, as if carrying the weight of the secrets it held. She kept turning over every possibility of what could be inside, her curiosity clashing with a cautious sense of dread. The next morning, she approached the box carefully, examining its rusted edges and old corroded lac. It was nothing like the ordinary evidence she dealt with in court. This was something preserved for decades, something someone clearly wanted hidden. Papers, valuables, maybe even proof of corruption, she guessed. And the thought made her stomach tighten. Whoever had buried it had a reason to fight tooth and nail to keep it secret. Suddenly, her phone vibrated sharply. An unknown number flashed on the screen, and a single message appeared. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Sierra's hands shook slightly as she read the words. The warning left no doubts. Someone else knew about the box. Someone dangerous. Her pulse quickened, but she refused to let fear win. She had to know what Clayton had protected. She considered contacting Judge Halley for guidance, but hesitation crept in. The judge had authority, but she had no way of knowing if the message was meant to intimidate Sierra Eleanor, if it was part of a larger plan. Clayton's words rang louder in her mind than any procedure she had been trained to follow. She realized that this wasn't just a legal case anymore. It was a matter of survival. By midday, Sierra made her decision. She would open the box, but not in her office. She needed a secure location, somewhere she could protect herself and the contents from prying eyes. Whatever lay inside would change everything she thought she knew about Clayton Briggs and about the city, that had been trying for years to bend him to its will. This was the beginning of a storm she could not escape. Sierra secured the box in the trunk of her car and drove to a small, rented warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The streets felt unusually quiet, almost watchful, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror, but every time she checked, the shadows appeared empty. Her instincts, honed over years in the courtroom, screamed caution, yet the pull of the mystery inside the box was irresistible. Inside the warehouse, she laid the box on a sturdy metal table and took a deep breath. The lock was stubborn, resisting her efforts, but with careful patience, she clicked it open. The lid creaked, and the smell of aged paper and soil escaped, filling the room. Sierra's eyes widened as she lifted the contents: stacks of documents, several small envelopes, and a thin, leather-bound journal. The first glance revealed something more than ordinary. Evanizette looked like a record of secrets, hidden transactions, and mentions of people who had disappeared quietly over the years. Sierra hesitated, realizing the weight of what she was about to read. Each document hinted at corruption, intimidation, and cover-ups that stretched far beyond Clayton's land. The journal was filled with meticulous notes, dates, and cryptic warnings, each entry a thread in a larger story. The pieces were coming together, and the pattern they revealed was dangerous enough to end careers or lives. Her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "Stop. Now." This time, there was no room for doubt. Someone was watching her movements closely, tracking her decisions, and clearly willing to use force if necessary. Sierra's pulse raced, but she refused to be intimidated. Clayton had trusted her implicitly, and now it was her responsibility to honor that trust. Taking a deep breath, Sierra began examining the first document in detail. As she read, her eyes grew wider with each revelation. The city had been manipulating more than property disputes. It had been systematically erasing people who resisted, and Clayton had been fighting not just for land, but for survival. The stubborn man's warnings weren't paranoia. They were a lifeline. Sierra knew in that moment that her involvement had just turned deadly serious, and there was no turning back. Sierra worked late into the night, carefully documenting the contents of the box. Every page revealed a layer of deception she hadn't imagined, implicating city officials, contractors, and even law enforcement. Her mind raced as she connected the dots. This was bigger than any legal case she had ever handled. Clayton Briggs hadn't just been stubborn, he had been protecting evidence that could topple powerful figures. The quiet of the warehouse was suddenly broken by a faint noise near the door. Sierra froze, heart hammering. Footsteps. She hadn't locked the warehouse fully, assuming her isolation would be enough. Now, shadows stretched across the walls, and she instinctively reached for her phone, considering calling the deputies. Whoever was there wasn't coming for routine inspection, they were coming for the box. Sierra moved quickly, grabbing the documents and sliding them into a secure bag. Her mind raced for options. She could leave through the back exit, but the streets were unfamiliar and dimly lit. She could stay and confront whoever was outside, but she had no weapon and no backup. Every scenario seemed dangerous. Yet one truth remained clear. She couldn't let the box fall into the wrong hands. A shadow passed the small window. Sierra's pulse quickened. Whoever it was, they were careful, watching her. She whispered Clayton's warnings under her breath. "Don't trust anyone from the city, especially the ones who act polite." His words weren't just caution, they were prophecy. The danger she had ignored for hours now loomed directly over her, pressing in with suffocating intensity. Sierra made her choice. She grabbed the bag and bolted toward the rear exit, heart pounding in sync with her rapid footsteps. She didn't know if they were following, but she knew she couldn't stop. The secrets Clayton had protected were alive now, and she was the only one standing between them and the people who would kill to erase them. Sierra raced down the darkened alley behind the warehouse, the weight of the bag pressing against her shoulder like a physical force. Her breaths came fast, uneven, but her mind remained sharp, calculating the fastest route to safety. Somewhere behind her, she heard faint footsteps, careful and deliberate, but she refused to look back. The city streets that were normally familiar now seemed alien, twisted by shadows, and the sudden awareness that she was being hunted. Every corner she turned felt like a trap, every parked car a potential hiding place for whoever was following her. She clutched the bag tighter, feeling the rusted edges of the box inside, and reminded herself that Clayton Briggs had trusted her with something far more dangerous than she had realized. She ducked into a small underground parking garage, slipping between rows of vehicles and listening. The footsteps had stopped. She paused, heart hammering, and tried to control the panic threatening to rise. Whoever had sent those anonymous warnings knew exactly where she had gone, and they weren't bluffing. The implications of what she held in the bag were staggering. This wasn't just a case of city corruption or property disputes. The box contained evidence that could destroy lives, and now she was at the center of it. Sierra's mind raced through options, each riskier than the last. She could call Judge Halley, but then she would be bringing the danger into the courtroom, and she wasn't sure the judge would even fully understand what she was dealing with. She could try to lose whoever was following her, but the city had resources she couldn't anticipate. It was then she realized something terrifying. Clayton Briggs hadn't been defiant merely to protect his land. He had been protecting her, too, without knowing it. The warnings he shouted in court weren't just paranoia, they were preparation for what was coming. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Sierra navigated through back streets, the hum of the city now filled with hidden threats. Every car that passed, every shadow that flickered against a wall, set her nerves on edge. She thought again of the journal, the envelopes, the rusted documents, each piece, a puzzle that someone powerful wanted buried. She understood now that her life was no longer just about legal obligations. It was about survival, and the moment she opened the box, she had unknowingly signed herself into a game far deadlier than any courtroom drama she had ever faced. Finally, she reached the safety of her apartment building, a small fortress compared to the streets outside. She bolted the door and sank to the floor, the bag still clutched tightly in her arms. For the first time, exhaustion hit her, along with the full weight of the situation. Clayton Briggs had warned her, and she hadn't fully listened until now. The box wasn't just a collection of papers, it was a key to a network of secrets, a chain of lies stretching higher than she could imagine. Whoever was chasing her would stop at nothing to retrieve it, and Sierra realized she had entered a world where stubbornness alone wasn't enough to survive. She had to be smarter, faster, and more daring than anyone who would come for her next. Sierra spent the next morning cautiously scanning her apartment for signs of intrusion. Every creak, every flicker of light made her heart jump, and yet she knew she couldn't hide forever. The city, and whoever was behind the threats, was more resourceful than she had anticipated. She needed help, but she also knew she couldn't trust just anyone. Clayton Briggs's warnings echoed in her mind. Don't trust anyone from the city, especially not the ones who act polite. The irony was that the very people she might have turned to for guidance were the ones most likely to betray her. She decided to reach out to a private investigator she had worked with years ago, a man named Marcus Kane. Marcus had a reputation for discretion and unorthodox methods, the kind that didn't rely on official channels or paperwork. He was blunt, fearless, and stubborn in ways that reminded her of Clayton. She hesitated before calling, weighing the risk of anyone else knowing about the box. But ultimately, she needed his expertise to navigate this. When he answered the phone, she explained the situation in carefully measured words, omitting certain details until she could gauge his trustworthiness. Within hours, Marcus arrived at her apartment, a tall, imposing figure who immediately surveyed the room as if reading her thoughts. Sierra explained the box, the documents, and Clayton's warnings. Marcus's eyes narrowed, not in doubt, but in understanding. "You're in deeper than you realize," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "This isn't about codes or property anymore. Whoever's after that box will kill to get it back. And you, Ms. Warren, are the only reason it's still in one piece." Together, they examined the documents, once again. Marcus pointing out inconsistencies and hidden details Sierra had overlooked. Names were crossed out, dates shifted, financial transactions rerouted in ways that suggested more than simple corruption. These were deliberate, strategic manipulations, and someone had gone to great lengths to keep the truth hidden. Sierra realized the city's attempts to control Clayton had been part of a larger plan to suppress information that could topple influential figures. Every warning, every obstruction, every citation had been a piece of a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. As dusk settled, Sierra and Marcus prepared to leave the apartment, knowing that staying put would be dangerous. Sierra glanced at the box, now resting in a reinforced briefcase, and a chill ran down her spine. Clayton Briggs had been protecting more than his land. He had been protecting a secret powerful enough to threaten the very foundations of the city. And now, that secret was in her hands. The game had shifted. She wasn't just an attorney anymore. She was a target, a guardian, and a player in a dangerous web of secrets that would demand every ounce of her cunning and courage to survive. The night air was thick with tension as Sierra and Marcus moved cautiously through the quiet streets, carrying the box between them. They knew every step could be observed, every shadow a potential threat. Marcus had arranged a safe house, a secluded property several miles outside the city, and Sierra felt a mix of relief and apprehension as they approached it. Even here, however, she knew that safety was relative. Whoever was after the box had resources, and the chase was far from over. Once inside, Sierra locked every door and window, double-checking security measures, while Marcus set up a perimeter. She sat heavily, the weight of the box in her lap reminding her of the responsibility she now carried. For the first time, she truly understood the magnitude of what Clayton Briggs had been protecting. This was not just a legal matter or a property dispute, it was a dangerous secret that powerful people would kill to protect. Hours later, just as Sierra began to feel a fragile sense of calm, a sudden crash shattered the night's silence. The front door's reinforced lock had been tested violently. Footsteps echoed across the porch, and the unmistakable sound of breaking glass filled the air. Sierra grabbed the box instinctively while Marcus drew his weapon, his face set with determination. Whoever had followed them had found the safe house and they were prepared to fight for it. Adrenaline surged through Sierra as she ducked behind a reinforced cabinet, clutching the box. Marcus moved like a shadow, positioning himself between her and the intruders. The tension was almost unbearable, each second stretching into eternity. Voices shouted outside, and the unmistakable clang of metal against metal told her this attack wasn't random, it was planned, targeted, and personal. The people chasing them knew exactly what they wanted. When the attackers finally breached the back entrance, Sierra realized that this was only the beginning. The box had become a symbol of defiance, a trigger for forces she couldn't yet comprehend. Every move they made, every second they delayed, could determine whether the secrets inside would survive or be lost forever. And in that moment, Sierra understood with a chilling clarity that Clayton Briggs's warnings had been the first layer of protection. Now, it was her turn to fight. The intruders stormed through the back entrance with a precision that made Sierra's pulse race. Every movement was deliberate, practiced, and terrifyingly coordinated, leaving no doubt that these were not ordinary burglars. Shouts, the clatter of metal, and the crash of objects filled the safe house, turning the space into a chaotic whirlwind. Sierra clutched the box to her chest, her heart hammering in rhythm with the chaos around her. Marcus was already in motion, intercepting attackers with swift, controlled movements, but Sierra knew that she couldn't rely solely on him. The box's safety rested squarely on her shoulders. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape route, and she spotted a small, narrow window at the far end. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward it, ignoring the screams and scuffling behind her. One of the intruders lunged, but she ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding a blow, and scrambled onto the fire escape outside. Cold metal pressed against her palms as she climbed quickly, every rung threatening to slip, every second amplifying the danger below. From the rooftop, Sierra assessed the surrounding buildings. The streets below were quiet, but danger lingered in the shadows, and she could hear the intruders regrouping, their frustration ringing through the night. She leapt across the gap to the next roof, landing hard and rolling to absorb the impact. The box still clutched tightly against her chest. Adrenaline surged through her veins, pushing her faster, sharper, more alert than she had ever been. Finally, she reached a deserted alley, several blocks away, chest heaving and limbs trembling from exertion. Marcus's voice crackled in her earpiece, assuring her that he had delayed the attackers, but she knew it was only temporary. The people pursuing her were relentless, and the secrets inside the box were more dangerous than she had imagined. Sierra pressed onward into the night, each step heavy with urgency and resolve. She was no longer merely a lawyer, no longer just a witness to the unfolding drama. She had become a participant in a dangerous game, hunted by forces she was only beginning to understand. The box was her burden and her responsibility, and she vowed silently that it would remain safe no matter what it took, and no matter who stood in her way. Sierra didn't stop running until the city streets had faded into the outskirts, where the shadows of abandoned warehouses stretched like silent sentinels. She pressed the box to her chest and allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, listening to her own ragged breaths echoing off the walls. The night air was cold, sharp, and cleansing, and yet the weight of what she carried made her shoulders sag. Every step she had taken, every risk she had run, now seemed insignificant compared to the storm she had stumbled into. She knew the attackers wouldn't give up. Whoever had sent them was powerful, determined, and merciless. Marcus met her at a prearranged location, a small, nondescript garage hidden behind a row of shuttered stores. He opened the trunk of his car, and Sierra carefully placed the box inside, locking it with the reinforced case she had brought. Marcus's eyes scanned the perimeter, ever vigilant. "You need to understand," he said quietly, "that this isn't just about land, taxes, or codes anymore. The people after this box will do anything to get it, and they'll stop at nothing." Sierra nodded, feeling the chill of reality settle deeper into her bones. She had thought she understood danger, but this was something far more calculated, far more personal. Inside the garage, Marcus began mapping out their next steps. He pointed to the documents he had memorized from their earlier examination of the box, certain names, record officials, contractors, and others who had vanished quietly over the years. The box was more than evidence. It was a blueprint of corruption, a chain of secrets that reached far higher than Sierra had imagined. Whoever had orchestrated Clayton Briggs's battles against the city had done so to protect something immense, something people would kill to conceal. Sierra's thoughts drifted back to Clayton, to his warnings, and to the stubborn defiance that had landed him in jail. She realized he had been fighting a war that no one else could understand, and now she had been drawn into it. The box was a beacon, and her discovery of it had made her a target. Marcus's voice brought her back to the moment. "We need allies, people who aren't entangled in the city's games, people who understand survival." Sierra nodded, already knowing some contacts she could trust: investigative journalists, former law enforcement who had left the system, even some of Clayton's own network. As the first hints of dawn touched the garage's grimy windows, Sierra felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She had the box, she had Marcus, and she had the knowledge that the secrets inside were alive, dangerous, and inescapable. Whatever the next move, she had to be smarter, faster, and more cunning than anyone who would come after her. And for the first time, she understood that the real battle was only beginning. Clayton's warnings had been true. She was no longer just a lawyer. She was a guardian. The storm she had entered was just getting started. Sierra and Marcus moved cautiously through the early morning streets, the box secured in the reinforced briefcase. Their plan was simple but risky. Contact someone who could amplify the truth without alerting the city's corrupt network. Sierra had a name in Magdalena Reyes, an investigative journalist known for exposing powerful figures and surviving the fallout. Elena had operated in the shadows for years, and Sierra knew she could trust her instincts. The challenge, however, was reaching her without tipping off anyone who might already be tracking Sierra's movements. They found Elena in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, her eyes sharp and alert as she scanned the room. Marcus introduced Sierra, and within minutes, they explained the situation, careful to leave out sensitive details about the attackers. Elena listened silently, her gaze fixed on the box, and then asked the question Sierra had been expecting. "Why did you bring it here alone?" Sierra met her eyes, unflinching. "Because no one else can be trusted." "Not yet." Elena's expression hardened, a mix of admiration and concern. "You've stepped into a war," she said, "and the people you're dealing with don't play fair. They've already tried to eliminate witnesses. I can help you, but you have to understand the stakes." Sierra nodded, her mind racing. She had already felt the danger firsthand. Now, she needed someone who could expose it without falling into the same trap. They spent hours reviewing the documents, piecing together a network of corruption that stretched further than Sierra had imagined. Names, dates, and financial transfers pointed to a hidden system of control people who had weaponized bureaucracy to protect their interests. The depth of the conspiracy shocked her, and yet a strange clarity emerged. She now understood why Clayton had been so defiant and so protective of the box. It wasn't just land, it was a map to the city's dark heart, a truth that someone powerful wanted erased at any cost. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Elena agreed to help disseminate the information in a way that would protect Sierra and Marcus while exposing the network. They devised a plan to leak small, verified pieces, creating pressure without revealing the box's exact location. Sierra felt a mix of relief and apprehension. For the first time since discovering the box, she had allies, but she also knew that the hunt wasn't over. Whoever was pursuing the secrets would escalate, and the safety of everyone involved now depended on speed, strategy, and the stubborn determination that Clayton Briggs had instilled in her. Sierra barely slept that night. Even in the brief safety of Elena's small apartment, the thought of the attackers lurking somewhere in the city pressed heavily on her mind. Every sound, sirens, footsteps, the hum of traffic, made her jump. The box, now hidden under a reinforced table, seemed almost alive, carrying with it the weight of secrets that could destroy lives. She traced Clayton Briggs's words in her memory. "They'll kill more. You're part of their machine now." Every warning, every hint of danger, felt sharper than ever. By mid-morning, Sierra and Marcus set out to deliver a verified portion of the documents to Elena's trusted media contacts. The streets were unnervingly quiet, shadows stretching longer than usual. They moved with careful precision, avoiding main roads and well-lit areas, every step measured, every turn deliberate. But deep down Sierra knew someone was watching. Her instincts, sharpened by hours of paranoia and survival, told her they had walked into a trap. As they approached a secluded alleyway to make a brief handoff, a van screeched to a halt behind them. Two masked figures jumped out, surrounding them instantly. Sierra's heart raced, and she instinctively raised the briefcase, keeping it close. Marcus shifted in front of her, ready to protect her with every ounce of strength. The attackers were efficient, professional, and ruthless in their approach, leaving no room for negotiation. Sierra's mind raced. The handoff had been a decoy. Someone had known exactly where they would be. The realization was chilling. Whoever had orchestrated this knew their every move, predicting their paths and timing with unnerving precision. It wasn't just about the box anymore, it was about power, control, and the lengths people would go to protect their secrets. She clutched the briefcase tighter, knowing that if it fell into the wrong hands, everything Clayton had protected, and everything she had risked, would be lost forever. But even in the face of danger, Sierra refused to falter. Her survival instinct merged with the fierce determination that Clayton had instilled in her through his warnings and defiance. She had survived break-ins, chases, and attacks, and she would survive this. With Marcus by her side, she began to plan her next move, knowing that escaping this trap would require every ounce of cunning, courage, and resourcefulness she possessed. The storm wasn't over. In many ways, it was only intensifying. Sierra and Marcus moved quickly through the labyrinth of alleys, the attackers hot on their trail but momentarily disoriented by the sudden diversion Marcus had created. Each heartbeat echoed in Sierra's ears as she clutched the briefcase, her mind calculating every possible escape route. They ducked behind dumpsters, vaulted low fences, and slipped through narrow passages, known only to the city's most familiar paths. Every second counted. One mistake could mean losing everything or worse, their lives. Finally, they reached a quiet rooftop, the city sprawling beneath them in a maze of lights and shadows. Sierra set the briefcase down, allowing herself a moment to breathe and assess their situation. She unlatched the reinforced case and began sorting through the documents again, her eyes widening as the full picture emerged. The city's network of corruption was far deeper than she had imagined, stretching into powerful offices, contractors, and law enforcement people who had orchestrated Clayton Briggs's persecution and countless other injustices. The box was not just evidence, it was a revelation capable of shaking the city to its core. As they examined the materials, Sierra realized the final piece of the puzzle was a ledger detailing clandestine transactions tied directly to the very people who had pursued her. Every name, date, and transaction connected the dots of corruption, exposing the extent of the city's hidden machinery. Clayton's warnings suddenly made complete sense. He had been the lone defender of a truth that powerful people wanted buried. And now, that truth rested in her hands. Elena's voice came through the earpiece, calm but urgent. "Sierra, the documents are enough. If we release them carefully, we can expose the network without risking the box falling into the wrong hands. But you need to be careful, there are eyes everywhere." Sierra nodded, her resolve hardening. She understood that every move from this point forward would have consequences, and any misstep could unleash chaos. She had to be precise, strategic, and fearless. Sierra looked at Marcus, their shared determination, a silent promise. The storm had reached its climax. Clayton Briggs's defiance had not been in vain. It had led her to the truth, and the responsibility of exposing it rested with her. With one last glance at the city skyline, Sierra made a silent vow. She would protect the box, reveal the corruption, and survive the consequences. Whatever came next, she would face it head. The city's secrets were finally coming to light, and nothing would stop her now. Sierra stood on the steps of the city hall at dawn, the briefcase hidden securely beneath her coat. The streets were quiet, the usual bustle of bureaucracy replaced by an almost eerie calm. Today was the day she would expose the corruption Clayton Briggs had fought to protect her from, and she felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a heavy cloak. Every decision, every risk she had taken, had led to this moment. She was no longer just a lawyer. She was a guardian of the truth, the only person capable of unveiling the secrets that had haunted the city for years. Inside the city council chambers, Elena and her trusted media contacts waited, cameras ready, not a hint of hesitation in their eyes. Sierra opened the briefcase carefully, laying out the documents, the journal, and the ledger. The room went silent as the evidence spoke for itself. Falsified records, hidden transactions, illegal property seizures, and intimidation campaigns orchestrated by those in power. Every detail was undeniable, and Sierra felt the gravity of the revelations press down on the room like a living thing. The reaction was immediate. Officials shifted uneasily, whispers spread, and some tried to challenge the authenticity of the materials. But the document's meticulous detail left no room for denial. Sierra watched as a wave of accountability began to form. People who had believed themselves untouchable were forced to confront the consequences of their actions. Clayton Briggs's warnings had not been ignored in vain. His stubborn defiance, once seen as mere obstinacy, was now recognized as courage. Outside, Marcus and a small team ensured that the box remained secure, anticipating retaliation from those exposed. Sierra knew the danger wasn't entirely over there, would always be forces attempting to silence the truth, but she also knew that by taking the risk, she had shifted the balance. Clayton's perseverance had inspired hers, and the city would never be the same. Those who had operated in the shadows had been brought into the light. As the sun rose over the skyline, Sierra stepped onto the steps of City Hall, breathing in the crisp morning air. She felt a profound sense of relief, tempered by the knowledge that the fight for justice was ongoing. But for the first time, she allowed herself a moment of triumph. Clayton Briggs's defiance, her courage, and the truth they protected together had prevailed. The world now knew what had been hidden, and in that revelation, Sierra realized something vital. Stubbornness, courage, and unwavering integrity could change even the most dangerous game. The city's secrets had been unveiled, and she had survived to see justice finally take hold.